Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome to our weekly conversation about the future of work. It's great to see everyone. If you can, then please turn on your cameras. It's really good to see everybody here. Good to see faces. We'd like to thank the NSF for partly funding this effort, and I'd like to thank the organizers: Linda Boyle, John Lee, Rafael Sadoun, Manfred Chelgi, and of course, Ora Chair and myself are the other two organizers. So this meeting is now being recorded. Questions, please, in the chat, and or it will be managing the moderating the questions.
Yeah, I'll probably will call on you to ask your question. It will be nice if you can have your camera on when you ask the question, but feel free to type questions in the chat as we go.
And we're thrilled to have Gloria Mark with us today. She's a professor at the University of California, Irvine, and she's done a lot of exciting work related to all those questions that we're interested in as far as the future of work. So Gloria, let me get started. So one thing that you've explored is interruptions caused by email. And you've found that they can cause stress and sadness. And so my question to you is, how should we manage email? And are there particular lessons for these times that we're finding ourselves in? And perhaps, how does technology come into play?
Well, so yeah, you know, I've been studying people in the workplace for quite some time, and the number one reason why they claim they're distracted is from email, and so that seems to be the bane of our existence. It's not going to go away, so we have to learn how to deal with it. And so we also find consistently, and it's a very robust effect. Doesn't matter how we measure it, whether it's through using sensors and logging email and measuring stress physiologically or self-reports, but people are stressed when they go on email, and it's really uncanny because you have people, you know, we would use heart rate monitors to get heart rate variability, a measure of stress. We would log their computer activity. They would go on email because we have the logs. We see exactly when they're going on email. We control for all the things we can think of that can possibly cause stress, things like job demands, and looked at gender and age and chronic stress. They go on email, stress goes up. They go off email, stress gradually goes back down. So there's something about email that triggers stress. And it's different than other kinds of distractions. So it seems to be, I mean, there are several things going on. And one of them, maybe the main thing, is that email is just a symbol of work, right? It's not like you're always getting emails that are friendly and praising you, but it's more like, here, I need you to do this, right? I need you to give me this information. It's asking people to do things. And there's also, it's not so easy to just simply stop email, because first of all, because it's related to work, but secondly, there are social dynamics that are wrapped up with email. So there's social capital. So I'm going to answer email because someday I want you to answer my email, right? There's this exchange of resources, and you know, so I want to invest in the future being that you're going to help me out at some point. So to just not answer email is not much of an option, right? So how to deal with it? Well, that's a really good question. I once gave a talk at it was a conference of startups, and there were about 60 startups, and they were all trying to solve email. So it's a big business to try to come up with an alternative for email. And there isn't a really good one. Some people might say Slack is. I would say it's just kind of shifting the burden over to something else. I don't think Slack is solving it. My own personal opinion is Slack, you know, I'm on probably 15 Slack channels, and that just gives me more things to keep track of. At least with email, I have everything in one inbox. But with Slack, it's distributed, and it's even harder for me to keep up. We've looked at whether batching is a solution, and it seems to be that it only helps if you have, for certain kinds of people with certain kinds of personalities, but batching per se does not really make your stress go down. Batching meaning you check email once in the morning, maybe once after lunch, once in the evening. So, but we do know that the opposite of batching, the extreme opposite of continually checking email, that's not good either, because that's just continual interruptions throughout the day. So there's not a great solution. There have been some very clever solutions. I love Michael Bernstein's solution of email valet, although it's not workable, but it's where you have the crowd deal with your email. So you just open it up to the crowd to sort your email, answer it. Sounds great, but that's not without problems either. So here we remain, right? We're in 2020 and without a really good solution for email.
So do you think part of it is that it's simply written and there are just so many potential misunderstandings as well, or does that play a role? Because I personally find, maybe I just don't write very good emails, but I find it when there is any sort of tension that needs to be discussed, email is just harder than having a face-to-face work Zoom meeting. How much does that, do you think, play a role?
Yeah, it certainly plays a role. So there's been decades of research in computer-mediated communication that shows that it just lacks the social cues that we have face-to-face. And so it doesn't have intonation and facial expressions and body stance and all these things that help communicate. And so you're just stuck with text. And yeah, it can come across in the wrong way, right? Because unless a person is a very good writer, email is not always very nuanced in communicating.
So another topic that you also looked at, which I find really interesting, is the part of detachment from work and then what you called reattaching to work and how this affects productivity. And I think 3 weeks ago we had Gregory Welch, who spoke about nurses and how they, gear up to work, and also how they might be able to use some agents to talk about their day to sort of remove levels of stress. And so how do you think all this might play out potentially if we had good tools right now as we're working from home, or our group is interested also in looking at driving, so what if you had a car that's self-driving for parts of the time, and you can go in and out of a work task. So I'm really curious about your thoughts on this detachment and then reattachment and how this is related to productivity.
Yeah, it's actually a great question for our COVID times, right? So this work on work detachment and reattachment was led by Alex Williams. he was an intern at Microsoft Research when I was there, and we worked together on this. And he developed this tool called SwitchBot, which I love. And SwitchBot basically helped people detach and reattach. And the way it worked is that you would start your day, and SwitchBot, which was a text bot, would ask, there were one of two conditions, the task-based condition and the emotional-based condition. And in the task condition, you were asked, what do you want to accomplish today? What are your goals? In the emotional condition, it asked, how do you want to feel today, right? And this helped people in terms of reattaching at the beginning of the day, right? And then SwitchBot would come on at the end of the day to also help people detach. It's psychologically healthy to detach from work because we know also from research that if people are really stressed in the workplace, there are carryover effects, right? So you want to try to have this delineation between work and home life to minimize these carryover effects. It doesn't always happen. So we're living in COVID times, and people are working from home. The boundaries between work and personal life are so porous. And the times that are work and the times that are personal, it's all blurred, right? So it's much, much harder to detach and reattach from work. It's a real challenge. It's a challenge. People may not even have physical places that they can go to detach from the rest of the family, or they may have a partner they're living with, and they have to conduct work in the same room. So you don't have necessarily a physical separation. So work detachment and reattachment is way harder. And so something else I think about in conjunction with this is the idea of that social interaction has also changed since we're working at home. And so in the workplace, we have informal interaction, right? And this kind of informal interaction gives us social support in the workplace. You complain to your colleagues, oh my God, I have this report I have to do. You know, it's just a way to blow off steam. You get support from others. When we're on Zoom meetings, especially back-to-back Zoom meetings, we don't get this kind of informal support. And if a person is at home and has a family or has other people, they might be able to get this kind of support, but they're not getting it so much from the workplace. And this makes the whole process of attachment and detachment harder when you don't have this kind of social support. So the social support is a buffer for stress, right? So the stress you're having when you're just working around the clock full time.
Now, you also looked at mindfulness techniques, and I wonder how that plays into what you just discussed.
Yeah, so this is ironic because my university, UCI, is actually offering free mindfulness courses as we speak. And so I always wanted to take one, and I started taking one. And I have really learned a lot, not just in terms of mindfulness, but in how people use digital media. And mindfulness teaches you the difference between mind wandering and being really focused. And so, and it teaches you to have a meta-awareness of when you're focused and when you're mind wandering. And so this is so relevant when we're working on digital media, because it's so easy to do mind wandering, and we have so many visual cues on our interfaces. Like, you know, you see that Facebook tab, click on the Facebook tab, go to Facebook, and there are sites like Facebook or like, there's simple gaming sites or news sites or shopping sites that give you permission to mind wander. So you can go to a site, you might start reading it, but because it's kind of mechanical, it's not challenging, it's so easy to do mind wandering. And before you know it, a lot of time has passed by. So,
Yeah.
that's another challenge that we have.
Laura, do you want to
Yes.
look at some of the questions?
So thank you, Gloria. There are so many questions coming up. Maybe we'll start with Diana that ask about the mental cost of kind of virtual meetings. Diana, do you want to ask the question?
Sure. So I say this in my own experience. After I have these Zoom calls, extended Zoom meetings, I find myself kind of more mentally taxed and tired than I would in a regular in-person meeting. So I'm wondering if that has something to do with like the nonverbal cues that we can't see, and we have to work harder to mentally like express ourselves and what we're trying to say in these virtual meetings. And does that contribute to the distractions we might engage with to kind of offload that burden we have? So instead of kind of intently focusing on this meeting, trying to catch everything, I'm going to take a break with my emails. I'm going to take a break by going on Twitter.
Yeah, of course, that certainly contributes to it. And as you said, we lack the social cues that we have in person. But I also think there are other things. Part of it is just the scheduling of Zoom. So most people, and I believe I'm like most people, we have our meetings just back to back, and we don't have these transitions in between, and we're making these extreme cognitive shifts. Like, oh, it's 9 o'clock. I need to go to another meeting. Oops, 10 o'clock, rush to another meeting. And we don't have this time to reset. And that even this idea of detaching and reattaching, right? In the physical world, we would take a few minutes to walk to a conference room, or you take there's a transition time between meetings. But also when you have Zoom, I think it just demands more concentration, because you see a face on a screen, and it's just very hard to be doing other things when you're supposed to be focusing on this image on the screen or speaking on the screen. So I think it's just much more taxing, requires a lot more mental resources to participate in Zoom, right? That and the back-to-back meetings and the lack of social cues. Yeah.
So talking about kind of social cues and concentration, other things that might come on the way could be social media. And when we transition emails to tools like Slack, I think that Shamsi had a concern. So Shamsi, can you share your question?
Yeah, I was thinking of asking a different question based on the last question. Hey, Gloria.
Hi, Shamsi.
But I'll go back.
We were just in a Zoom meeting yesterday.
So I'm going to throw in this quick question because it triggered a thought as you were speaking, Gloria. And I was thinking that, well, I'm looking at this Zoom interface where there are like, what now, 24, I can see 24 people at the same time. Do you think that this is more taxing than just seeing the speaker? Because now I'm also not only processing you, I'm also processing everyone else. And I wonder if there's a difference there. I don't know. I mean, it triggered a thought, but that wasn't my question.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. It could be. It would be a great thing to study. I remember a long time ago, I did a study with Aaron Bradner, and we studied something called social facilitation. And it's the idea of, like, this is a very old idea in psychology, that if you're doing something, and if it's a well-learned task and you do it in the presence of others, the presence of others leads you to do it even better, right? There, it creates an arousal. And if it's a poorly learned task, you do it even worse because the arousal has this opposite effect of inhibiting your performance. And so I think that Zoom probably has some kind of social facilitation effect. We studied this. So Aaron Bradner and I found that electronically you get the same social facilitation effects. So we had people doing tasks, we had another person online electronically, and the same effects happened. And so I wonder if Zoom, and it's maybe even intensified if you have 24 people watching you, it probably does affect people depending on if it's a well-learned or poorly learned task.
And on the other hand, it also has this sense of community. So I really like this interface. So I think that there's a balance there.
Yeah.
I'll quickly throw in my original question, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I think it's still about information overload. So you talked about email, and because it seems like work, and so it seems more stressful, but what about more social, kind of like instant messaging? And when I say social, it could be about work, but it's lighter weight. And do you think that with the information, constant stream of information that's coming from instant messaging, do you think that can become similarly stressful? So where are we going with communication actually?
Yeah, that's a whole topic in itself. So yeah, of course, instant messaging has a social function, but I argue it's in no means a replacement for face-to-face communication, right? It just doesn't have the nuance or the social information. But it has its own purpose for getting information through very quickly. But it's also interruptive, as you know, right? And again, you have these same kind of social dynamics wrapped up with instant messaging. You can't ignore it easily, right? Because there's another person involved and you've got social pressure to respond. And so your whole day can be interruptions with instant messaging because of these social dynamics. You know, nobody wants to have bad relations with other people, so you just keep going. So yeah, so there's, I mean, it's kind of, maybe a good analogy is if you're sharing an office with someone, right? You might have occasional chit chat with the person, but the person in your office has an awareness of when you're working and when you're not. So they have a good sense when they can interrupt you, right? Whereas with instant messaging, there's not necessarily, you know, unless you put a do not disturb. Yeah.
So can we use some more awareness cues besides the do not disturb into social media? I think it could be a really interesting kind of addition to social media to create this awareness. Just what kind of clues can we integrate?
You know, a long time ago, you probably remember this, Park had set up this video channel between Euro Park and Park in the Bay Area, and it was this continued channel. And the idea was to promote awareness and social interaction. It didn't work all that well, otherwise they'd still be using it. But you know, maybe some additional kind of communication or information about people that can convey very seamlessly when someone is working and when they're not. There was also a really great system that Scott Hudson had developed. It was called Shadow. Maybe someone remembers what it was called, where you didn't see a video of exactly the other person's office, but you just saw a shadow to know if they're in their office or not. And it was enough information that could at least give you a sense of, oh, this person seems to be working or not, without invading privacy too much.
Yeah, I think we have a long way still to go and experiment, especially I feel now when we live in a world where it's not clear when we're working and not, because you might be distracted by other things in the house or the different kinds of work, the mental work of managing kids, the mental work of managing colleagues remotely. So I think Albert has an interesting question that I want to go back to about emails and how we can switch the cost. Albert, can you turn on and join us?
Hello, can you see me?
Yes.
Yes. So we worked with also a company some years back on an idea that you have because as you said at the beginning, email is usually work. And I think what we see, a lot of people use it also to basically cover their back. So for example, you CC people just to make, if somebody complains later, you can say, oh, I've CC'd you. So I think we use it as communication media, as well as a media where we cover what we do. And I think this is sort of one of the things we identified at that time, that it's not just a communication media, it's also a media to basically make sure everybody knows everything, and even if this is not required. And there the idea was, as long as we don't have cost associated, I think it's the spam question on a different level. And there was the idea, you take a company and you figure out people send 500 emails a month. So you get a quota of 500 emails. And basically once you exceed this, your project is basically billed by the other project. Basically people are on time. And you could imagine within a company, you can really sort of bill each other for the email time. So you have sort of a flat rate, which everybody can ask other people in a project, but you're billed for email. And there, we never really deployed it, but the idea was by doing that, you would reduce unnecessary email. Because I think in the end, it's, as you said, it's whether it's Slack, it's WhatsApp, it's email, it's the amount of communication. If we don't find a way to reduce it, probably the stress is not going away. And so one idea was to really reduce it, to make the sender think, do you really need to send it? And I think that links into the last topic of awareness. I think we did also look into, if I know that the other person is busy, do I really want to send it? So I think this question of putting more responsibility on the sender side. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah,
no, that idea is actually, there have been different forms of that idea that have been proposed. There was one I liked very much, and there was even a company formed, and I don't remember the name of the company anymore, but people were allotted a certain number of points, let's say 1,000 points a month, and you could distribute, the sender could distribute those points on different emails however they want, which could indicate importance. So if Albrecht, I had a really important email that I needed to send you and it was really urgent, I might put 500 points on that email. And you see it and you say, wow, Gloria really wants something, pretty urgently. And if I just assign like 1 or 2 points, people might not pay attention. And then I use up my 1,000 points at the end of the month. There was another proposal that Bob Kraut had, and it had to do with basically the costs and benefits and the economy between senders and receivers. And it was a long time ago, and I don't remember the details of that, but that was another kind of proposal. I think those, certainly have potential, but they've never stuck. So they've been different. People have tried these different schemes, and for whatever reason, they just haven't stuck. And I don't know why.
But I think, sorry to interrupt you there, because I think we may be now at a time, we have started to use systems that are closed, like we have used Slack, where everybody has to use Slack. So basically adding it to Slack would be trivial. Adding it to WhatsApp would be trivial. Adding it to email, we looked at that time, how to add it to email. It's a nightmare because people will find a way around. So, but now we have moved into a world where we are used to sort of systems that are locked in. So I could have my priority Slack, whatever I want to call it, or my priority WhatsApp, and I could really implement that at the moment. So I think there may be a new time to try it out.
Yeah, that would be super interesting. I'll tell you a story. So we wanted to see whether we could improve focus at a company, and the company agreed to let us cut off email for a work week. And we measured people with heart rate monitors to see if their stress went down. The stress went down. We logged their computer activity. They did focus longer. And this one guy told us, you know, we interviewed people, and he said his boss used to come down the hall and assign him tasks all the time. And this guy was a chemist and had to set up lab equipment. And he could never set up his lab equipment because his boss would come and always get him to do other tasks. And when the email was cut off, the boss, who was only like 2 doors down, never sent, basically stopped coming to interrupt him. And I'm sorry, the part of the story that I got wrong was that when the guy had email, the boss would send these tasks via email. When the email was cut off, the boss could easily have walked down and told him face to face, but he didn't. There's something about email that makes it very easy to delegate work. And if there's a way to stop that, that would also be really great.
This is a super interesting discussion. Thank you. So let's slowly wrap up, at least the recorded part. And maybe, Gloria, if you want to wrap up with, what is it that excites you? So what is your vision for future of work through this lens of HCI?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of a lot of things. I am very interested in this idea of work attachment and detachment, and trying to understand how we could increase social support to reduce stress, and to help people make this detachment easier. So I'm also interested in how we might find ways to help people focus longer and be less distracted, and as a consequence, less stressed. Because we know that shifting attention is associated with higher stress. So what can we do in terms of trying to promote better focus? Is it about how we schedule tasks? Can we find a way to better schedule tasks? Can we find a way to schedule tasks when people are at their peak attention, right? So if my peak attention is at 10 a.m., can I schedule my task? Can I have meetings, important meetings done at that time? Okay, it's not that easy because people tend to have different peak attention times. So we have to find a way to coordinate that. But in a nutshell, how to increase focus and how to help people better detach from work and take more sensible breaks without getting caught up in rabbit holes of social media or news these days.
Thank you, Gloria. This was really fun. And I think I certainly have learned a lot. So thanks. I'm looking for my little reaction button, the clapping.
Yeah, it was fun for me too.
And so let me just say that we're going to have another conversation next week. So hope to see you all. We're actually going to have a slightly different version of it. We're going to have a guest moderator, and Chris Janssen, and he'll talk to Maciej Graf, Wendy Ju, and Holly Yanko about robots and interacting with robots. And in fact, the week after that, we're going to have Ed Doran from Microsoft Research join us. And that's going to be exciting too, because he brings a slightly different perspective from most of us who are researchers in academia. He is, he's thinking about building businesses and so forth, and what's worth investing in. So we're very much looking forward to that too. So thank you again, Gloria. This was wonderful. And I'll stop the recording now, and then we can stick around for a little social interaction. So thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. That was
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, that was fun.